welcome to the MedCity Pivot Podcast. I am Arundhati Parmar, Editor-in-Chief of MedCity News. This is our first season and the second episode of the first season that's focusing on cybersecurity. And I'm talking with David Bardan, GM of Healthcare with Clear. Now, Clear, as you know, is the security system that helps you bypass traditional lines to pass security and go to your gates at airports. A few years ago, they launched a healthcare business. So, how does that business now help health systems secure their own data? So, David, everyone knows Clear as an entity that helps people breeze through airport security. How do you take that expertise and bring it to data security in healthcare, especially as it relates to cyber attacks and protecting patient information?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So great to be on the show. Thank you for having me. So Clear has operated in the airport for what most people know its brand for about 15 years. And as you can envision in the airport, it's truly a zero fail environment. Being governed by the TSA and Homeland Security, we've had to adhere to some of the highest levels of security protocols that exist, having to be FISMA high, SOC 2 Type 2. We're one of the few counterterrorism technologies approved, right? So taking a lot of the understanding of what we've built in the airport has allowed us to actually build out our platform business. And healthcare, is quite similar in how it's regulated. It's also in many ways a zero fail environment when we think about the cybersecurity requirements and standards that healthcare systems need to adhere to prevent attacks, right? So we were able to just about 3 years ago build our platform business. And since we've built that business, we've really seen great traction in healthcare. We've invested heavily in a number of different integrations to make it seamless so that we can unify authentication. When you think about the workforce, for example, in healthcare, they're having to log into a multitude of systems. And in some cases, right, something as simple as resetting your password, you have to go through a cumbersome process to do that, especially with how good social engineers have become. And so in Clear's product, what we've done is we've taken all the mechanics of what you see in the airport and we've shrunk it down into a mobile or web-like experience. So a partner can embed this directly into their flow. And what we're doing is we're always verifying that you are you behind your device, right? This isn't, call it like one-time passcode like authentication where, they're proving a device is associated to you. This is biometric authentication. This is us validating that you are who you are as part of any experience that you're coming onto. And we provide a pretty meaningful dashboard back to our partners so that they can also choose the level of assurance they want to meet for the given use case. So the way I like to think about it in simplest terms is when you think about the friction, right, of appointment scheduling, it matters who you are, but it's not detrimental to the business. When you physically show up for a check-in, it matters more. So you'd want to do like a government-based check. But when you pick up a prescription, it really matters who that person is. And you may want to actually do additional corroborating checks behind the scenes. So different experiences in healthcare command different levels of assurance. And we're happy to be an identity player in the field of healthcare and service our partners.
So, when you said that you are confirming that you are you, uh, what's the status quo in the health system now? How are they only relying on multi-factor authentication, or what are they doing that they need to up their game on?
Yeah, so a lot of systems have instituted technologies that do basically knowledge-based authentication questions. So they'll ask you a series of questions to validate that you are you. The challenge with it is that a lot of those questions actually have been found online and through a number of leaks that have happened in the past 2 years. They're not really, ways that effectively can verify an individual. For example, I recently went through a flow myself and they actually asked me when was my parents' home built? And not only did I not know the answer to that question, I actually found it online by just simply doing a Google search. So, it's these type of questions that unfortunately were the safeguards of the call it last 10, 15 years. But with the amount of information that's online, the amount of leaks that have transpired, it's quite easy to effectively, social engineer your way and get access to someone's account. So unfortunately, that's the world that we live in today. The other ways that we've seen it be done are through more manual processes that are obviously cumbersome. So having to have someone like physically show up to a site. We've seen the evolution of that with even the Joint Commission as they required practitioners to onboard in person, and then through COVID, allowed means like Zoom or video to verify. You'd hold your driver license up to the next to your face, and then this past year they actually just approved IAL2 level of identity assurance, which is one of our abilities or functional capabilities in our product stack that we can adhere to and meet. We actually get audited by third party groups to make sure that we keep to that standard. So, I think in short, right, there are a number of ways that you can do it, but they're not necessarily, at least the ways that they've been done in legacy way functions. They're not necessarily the safe and secure ways that we need to, meet the today's standard for.
So I wanted to ask you something that's business related, but I think has a direct impact on cybersecurity, which is, health systems are consolidating all the time. They're working with many different vendors. They have different, medical devices on their, on their network, I guess, for lack of a better word. So when you come in to confirm identity, which parts do you address? Do you address medical devices that are being used in hospitals that can be hacked into, or are you looking at the correct physician logging on to the electronic health record and accessing information?
Well, it really depends on the partner and what they're trying to accomplish. And so you gave a few different examples. In some ways, it's securing the asset. In some ways, it's securing who that person is in that flow of, for example, re-authenticating back into their system. And in some ways, it's, for example, validating that that same individual that may live across 10 different EMRs, because to your point, there have been a number of mergers and consolidations, is the same unique individual. And so what we're doing is we're passing verified demographic info as part of our flow, and we're pushing that directly to the partner. So this is unique, right? This is not self-attested fields. This is verified demographic data. And we're getting it directly from the corroborated source of where that document was issued from. So if it was, for example, issued as a driver license, we're intact with the DMV to pull that verified information through. And as part of that, when we provide that information through to the partner, either as part of the establishment of that individual in their system, or if it's simply a linkage amongst a number of different places that person may exist within that system, we're also attaching a link ID. And that link ID actually becomes a persistent identifier for that individual within that organization. So that actually helps in many ways, because as you can envision, if you're a large healthcare system and you're not operating on one single instance of an EMR, you may have 10 versions of that person, but you need some way to very easily link them across. And that's not, it's something you see more and more, especially because of these mergers and consolidations. Also, we've seen, call it larger retail pharmacies as well in a similar position as part of all the unique offerings that they have, whether it's remote patient monitoring, bringing, healthcare to the home. They've hodgepodge a number of really great solutions together, but the solutions themselves aren't necessarily speaking to each other. And so that's what we're trying to create, is a unified experience and version of yourself. And that actually helps them as well, because that can also help through the linkage create a more personalized experience for that patient or for that workforce individual. The last thing I'll say is I think there's a lot of inefficiency on the workforce front as well, when we think about the credentialing process and the re-credentialing of practitioners every single year. These are the mundane questions of asking that person about their license to practice, their diploma, right? These are the documents that they have to pull together and then upload each and every single year to credential. Well, in this case, right, we can append all of those credentials directly to your identity, and we can streamline that entire process of getting through that credentialing flow. So what I like to think about as Clear and what it's doing in the realm of in the healthcare space, it's not just identity verification. I think identity verification in many ways is a commodity. There's a lot of companies that do it. We
Hmm.
have a unique nature in how we do it, because we stitch together different products behind the scenes to optimize for the greatest conversion and also meet different assurance levels. But the part that gets me really excited about what we're doing in healthcare is actually the depth to your identity. Because when you think about a consumer, a patient, you're not just your driver license, you're also your insurance card, you're also your HSA FSA payment card, you're also your pharmacy benefits, and all of these credentials that make you you unlock different experiences in different moments. And that's effectively what we're focused on, is that health identity, as I like to call it. It's the depth to
Hmm.
who you are.
Okay, that makes sense. Uh, Talk to me a little bit about who some of your partners are, because to provide any kind of service in healthcare is such a fragmented industry. You have to work with a ton of different people, especially if you're, working within the EMR. I'm assuming that you must have some kind of relationship with the EMR companies, including Epic. So curious about that.
Yeah, so we were really excited to announce our collaboration with Epic and Toolbox. So this has been a long-standing relationship, in the sense that we started off working with Epic, as most companies do, through their vendor services or connection hub path. And we learned a lot. We actually had a chance to very quickly iterate and test different experiences with a number of different care systems that were early adopters, many of which we've announced publicly, such as University of Miami Health down in Miami, Florida. We work with Wellstar down in Georgia, Rush in Chicago, and we can certainly send you a list of other partners we work with. But it was an exciting moment where a lot of our partners started to very quickly collaborate with Epic on how can we enhance identity verification across a multitude of workflows in Epic, with really the pain point coming initially in my chart of something as simple as a patient account creation flow or a patient account recovery flow. And we were really fortunate to actually be tapped by Epic as part of their evaluation process around this category in a whole, to become part of Epic's Toolbox. And so Epic Toolbox is a unique program that was launched roughly about a year ago. And the concept there is where Epic actually hand selects a number of different vendors to actually build directly into their experience more natively. And so
Hmm.
we're actually currently under construction, working with them hand in hand. And there's a lot of places this can help improve experiences, not just on the patient side, as we've started with in my chart, but also beyond. You think about experiences of, for example, proxy access and how a guardian can be linked to, for example, a child. You think about third party providers, third party doctors that are wanting to enter into a specific instance of Epic. They have to go through, channels like Epic CareLink and being verified through there. So there's so many places where identity matters. E-prescribing, right? When you think about controlled substances and having to have those individuals go through the proper certifications and verification of who they are. So we believe that there are many ways that we can make experiences safer and easier, right? It's unique to be able to say both in the same sentence. I think for a long time, most organizations had to compromise. You can't have both a good experience and a high level of security. We're
Hmm.
really focused on providing both.
Uh, Tell me a little bit about culture change. As you know, healthcare industry does not spend that much for in cybersecurity processes or software technology, whatever you want to call it. Is that changing because of what we've seen over the last year and several years, in fact?
Yeah, 100%. I think, it's a unique moment, and actually was with a large group of chief strategy and transformation officers yesterday speaking at an event. It's unique to see the talk track change. I think what's happened, right, is cybersecurity has always been viewed as more so something in the realm of IT, but it's now
Hmm.
becoming a much different conversation, and it's actually becoming almost like a competitive edge for some of the ways that these healthcare systems view, having a chief security or chief information security officer, because they do want to protect their workforce. They do want to protect the patient lives in their market, and they want to make those necessary investments. I'm even hearing that even the boards of these organizations actually have metrics now and frameworks that they want to get updates on quarterly, in terms of their investments in this. So I definitely think the willingness that is there to spend. But I will say this too, like I don't necessarily think it has to be expensive, right? When we thought about Clear and how we can bring this meaningfully to market, if you think about the inefficient ways of how it's been done to date, a lot of identity verification has been very siloed. So, for example, if I create a MyChart account for one healthcare system and I've been verified, and then I go to another, I'm having to go through the same knowledge based authentication questions all over again. Well, with
Mm-hmm.
Clear, right, we've built a networked identity where if you've verified once, whether it's in the airport, at the Home Depot, through Uber, right, any one of our partners, you can actually reuse that same identity that you've been verified with and unlock that next experience. And what that does, right, is it democratizes identity. It allows us
Mm-hmm.
to overarchingly bring down the cost structure across all of the varying organizations we work with, and make this a better experience. And that's a pretty unique position and stance to have, right? That's something that we're really excited about. I think healthcare is one in particular, an industry that, over the last 5 years has endured a lot of pain. Healthcare systems in particular are operating on razor thin margins. So if we can help improve the administrative burden and cost, right? Like, just to take you back to that knowledge based authentication question, scenario, if you
Mm-hmm.
fail one of those questions, you get kicked to a call center. And those call center calls are not cheap. They cost you $8 to $15 a call as a system, and then,
Wow.
and you see a lot of healthcare systems that have honestly, as a band-aid solution, put, these call centers on so many different problems. And they want to optimize, they want to bring these costs down, they want to drive greater self-service, but they have to do it in a secure way. So this is one of the major arenas and focus areas that we're having is how do we make the system more secure, but how do we also make this a better experience? How do we remove some of the operational challenges that these systems have? And how do we do it in a cost effective way?
Final question for me, and without talking about Clear, what advice would you give a health system that's thinking about upgrading its cybersecurity assets? How should they think about it? What are the two or three things that they really need to know before choosing a final solution?
Yeah, I think there's a number of different angles around cybersecurity, everything from the physical to the, call it digital infrastructure that they have in place. They have different audiences, right? They have patients that come in, they have their visitors that come in to visit loved ones, they have their workforce, they have vendors that come on site. And so they need to think about the risks associated to each of those areas and do a real assessment on the exposure that they have in each of those areas. And they need to think of, practical ways of securing whether it's the physical or the digital assets they have. And they need to see again where those exposures are and where is the greatest risk to the reputational brand of their organization, and what are some quick wins that they can put in place. They also need to diagnose where bad actors have gotten through, right? I think, the general statistic I've seen is that about 90% of cyber attacks stem from identity, stem from people getting access to username and password. So if 90% of these cyber attacks are tied to identity, I think, it's a good indication that they really should lean in and think through their identity strategy and how are they, allowing their users to authenticate. There's two components, right, when you think about identity. There's the I know who this person is, and then there's also, does this person actually have the authorized access to be able to go into this room? So this is David Bardan, but does he actually have the privileges to go into this room? So it's a large space, and there's a lot of different solutions that exist, to tackle in many ways each area. Clear, for example, is exclusively focused in authentication. We're not touching the authorization realm. So I think those are all things that a cybersecurity or healthcare organization needs to think about. I also recommend for any vendor that, a healthcare system is, for example, looking to vet, really, take the time of having them go through that, security review, really understand their certifications, really understand their internal processes. Because, if you're an organization that's going to rely on a third party, to, house data or process data, you know, and or expect them to really drive greater security measures across your organization, you've really got to take the time to understand, who that partner is, and do they have the appropriate security means and measures in place. Like, can you really trust them at the end of the day? So I think those are all things that you need to look at. I mean, it's rather unfortunate that some of the solutions that we've employed, like, in the market that we've seen, for example, those knowledge-based authentication questions, those are, through a lot of the credit bureaus, and that data is being resold, right, and is being shared. So, I don't think in the realm of healthcare, healthcare CISOs, CIOs would want that information to be getting out. So, I hope that enlightens or helps for those that are listening, and how they might think about their own cybersecurity strategy.
Perfect. Good practical advice. David, thank you so much for spending some time with us at MedCity Pivot Podcast.
Thank you for having me.